that 185-pound division. You know, it is no longer called the middleweight division. The UFC rankings have called 185 the average weight division. I don't know how long it was up there, but it was at least for a few minutes. We got some screenshots. And you're telling me that Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero are considered average weight.
I want to hear Bruce Buffer say the new average weight champion of the world.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Smeshcast. It is Smesh Sunday. We are fresh off of the fights. Marvin Vettori beating Jack Hermansson by unanimous decision, 49-46, I think, on most judges' scorecards. I think everyone really looked like it looked like, to me at least, he won 4 rounds to 1. Those first 2 rounds were dominant. He almost finished Jack in that second round. Third round, Jack kind of came back, started to look like Vettori might have been kind of gassing out a little bit, and then put it right back on in those 4th and 5th rounds. A beautiful job by Marvin Vettori to stamp his way as the first Italian to make the top 5 in a UFC division.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a great fight. And for me personally, it was unexpected. I mean, I hadn't seen too much of Marvin Vettori compete like over the last couple of years. And, you know, Jack looked great in his last fight against Gastelum. So I figured it would honestly be like a quick night and he would just try and submit him quickly. But he had a lot of trouble trying to get control on the ground. Like, Marvin has excellent defense, and his striking was just overall better.
Yeah, I mean, what I think I saw with Vettori that made his striking so much better was that he was just crisper. His shots were just all his punches were just straight. He didn't have those big looping punches that Jack was throwing, and he was beat Jack to the punch quite literally. That left straight, the commentators were making a big deal over it for good reason. It was just landing all night long, and he didn't look like he was trying to throw everything into it. Jack was mostly especially in that 5th round where he knew he had to get a finish, and I think that was the right move to make, absolutely. But he was just trying to touch him up and just keep on those volume, don't put everything into it, and that's, I think, the reason he ended up not gassing like it looked like he might in that 3rd round.
Yeah, so I mean, that the 3rd round is the only round that I would give to Jack. I'd say Marvin easily got the other 4. It was a competitive fight, but at the end of the day, I think Marvin just like got the best of him. And the commentators were saying how you know, Jack is such a lanky guy. Like he has the opportunity to stick Marvin back with like a nice clean jab, but he only throws hooks. So Marvin was just able to just like keep pushing forward and you know, keep him on the like on the back of his feet and eventually just dominate him.
Yeah, and Jack, it's kind of weird. I don't fully understand it. Something about him reminds me a bit of a Robert Whittaker, in that it seems like he gets dropped kind of easily. And I know that sounds a little bit offensive, but it does seem like he goes down for shots that maybe you wouldn't expect him to, like that shot he went down with in that 2nd round. To me, it doesn't look like a typical shot I would expect someone to go down from. However, that's not a measure of his toughness, because this man will fight through everything. You saw him fight through hell last night. In fact, I don't know if it was official or not, but that was the most significant strikes in a middleweight bout in history, and he was on the losing end of it. So he was badly outstruck, and he was fighting right to the end. So this is no testament to his toughness. He's as tough as anybody in the UFC. But it seems like he gets dropped rather easily. Rob, the same kind of thing, gets dropped, but recovers really well.
And I guess, I mean, you have to accredit that also to the power of Vettori and just, you know, his technical striking as well, that he just lands a nice clean shot. I mean, like, the shot that Jack got dropped was literally like he punched and broke the guard. Like his, you know, he was in his high guard and he just punched straight through and it just knocked him down.
I think what happened actually, I mean, we found out after the fact that he actually broke his eye socket. So it's possible that was actually the moment at which his eye socket was broken, because that was right on the face, right? It wasn't an equilibrium shot, right? It was a straight punch right under the eye socket. So that if that was what broke the eye socket, it could have just been like a shock reaction. And that's why he kind of covered up for a second and then said, you know what, I can do this, and kept fighting back. But in the moment, that's a lot of pain, dude. That I've been told. I mean, they talk about it all the time. that eye socket break is one of the most painful injuries that you can fight through, but it's just horrific. And you just keep on getting jabbed again, especially with Vettori's style, with a volume style, just again and again. Vettori, I know he doesn't have a very flat, like he's not known as this crazy good guy, but I mean, he has a sneaky good record. When you look at his UFC record, he only has 2 losses. He has 1 draw, but he's fought in the UFC, what is this, 10 times now? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 times in the UFC. And in those 9 fights, he's 6-2-1. One of those losses was a split decision loss to Israel Adesanya. Nobody, he is arguably, maybe you can talk Gastelum, who maybe almost finished him, and maybe you can talk the weirdness with Romero, but you can argue that he was the closest man to beating Israel Adesanya. And he hasn't, other than that, he hasn't lost since, when was his last loss? 2016. Okay. This is 4 years ago. So the guy is underrated. He clearly deserves to be in the top 5. You can see, you saw that last night. Who knows? A rematch with Izzy could be coming up. And I mean, personally, I think Izzy was pretty early in his career. This was a fight that they fought. When was this? I keep on closing the window. They fought in April 2018, right? So Izzy's had some real good in the last 2.5 years progression. This is very early in Izzy's career, but still, we never know if Vettori can put up a fight against Izzy like he did the first time.
Yeah, both fighters have, advanced so much, and I'd have to see more of Vettori. Like, if I were to call it right now, I'd say Izzy just destroys him.
With everyone.
Give him a couple. Yeah.
At 185.
But give him a couple more fights, help propel his name a little bit more and get it into the minds of the audience. And, I'm sure it'll be a much bigger name soon.
Yeah, and I mean, he called out quite a big name, right? He beat Jack, and he calls out Bohachinia, Paulo Costa. I mean, that is a ballsy play for anybody. I don't care who saw Israel just destroy and dismantle Paulo. When you're talking Izzy, you're talking a different dimension. You're talking about a different level of striking. Everybody has to walk into a Paulo Costa fight scared and worried and aware of that power. I don't know who I favor in that one, but I still think I kind of have to lean Paulo a little bit. I know that Vettori has some good volume, some straight punches, but I don't think Paulo cares. I think Paulo will walk through them, and I don't think he has a trickery that Israel had that will freeze Paulo. The only question for me is, how does Paulo look after that Israel fight? Does he have that confidence?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a fight that honestly makes sense. It's super competitive and makes sense for like the top 5. But yeah, I think that holds the biggest weight is, how does Paulo feel after losing one fight? Is he definitely exposed quite a few weaknesses in him, and does Marvin take advantage of those weaknesses?
And it's not,
maybe not.
It wasn't just losing a fight, right? He was embarrassed. He lost his confidence. It's not like he went into the Yoel Romero fight. They swung, and eventually one of them went down, or eventually the time ran out and they gave it to Yoel. This was like, he couldn't throw a punch. He was frozen in time. He didn't know what to do. He was tricked. He was mentally broken. When you mentally break someone, you don't know if they can build themselves back up. Now, if you look at the reaction from Paulo, there's 2 ways to look at it. Of course, everyone knows that Paulo has not taken the loss very easily. He's a little bit in denial. He's actually very much in denial. Does not blame himself very much for the loss. Says Izzy was cheating. Says Izzy was whatever. Maybe he wasn't ready. I don't even know. Every excuse you can think of. So from the positive end, okay, actually, let's go from the negative. Everyone always, of course, you want to learn from a loss, right? You want to become a better version of a fighter, and you want to obviously see what those holes were that were exposed and close them up. But on the positive end, I mean, Paulo's a guy who, part of his fighting persona is that allure of I'm invincible. Part of how he fights is he throws caution to the wind, and he knows that you will drop first. And by doing so, you close up, and he ends up not taking much damage and just bullying his way through. But when the bully loses, actually, that's a good way of saying it. He's a bully fighter. Well, the bully fighter got exposed and he was stood up to. If he doesn't know if he doesn't have the mental confidence to be a bully fighter again, I don't know if he's going to be successful. So by kind of being a little bit in denial, saying I wasn't really beat, it kind of allows that bully to stay there, right? If he doesn't admit to himself that that isn't as amazing as he thought he was, he can go back to that bully persona that did work on literally everybody except for Izzy. And I think that might actually work on a Marvin Vettori.
Potentially. I also think that doing that, he maybe keeps his mind a little bit too closed, and he may think that that fight was a fluke and there's nothing wrong with my style. I don't need to change anything.
That's what I'm saying is that maybe that's a good thing. Maybe because I honestly think that at least in this, I don't think that that's a sustainable style to win for 5-10 years. Mm-hmm. But I honestly think, especially with Yoel now out of the picture, we'll talk about that in a little bit. I think that his style beats and his body beats everybody except for Izzy. Maybe Rob has a chance. I think Rob can maybe beat him. Other than Izzy and Rob, I don't think anybody can beat him at 185. Darren Till. Yeah. Fine. Rob and Darren Till put up a fight, but I think it's very competitive. Everyone else gets destroyed, and I include what's his name, Cannonier in that equation.
Okay, so I'd agree with you. Like everybody that shows an extremely high level of like technicality and performance, I think has a fair shot at beating Costa.
But an extremely high level.
Yeah, extremely. And there's a huge gap between fighters in the top 10 and fighters in the top 5 and then in the top 3. And as that technicality goes up. So yeah, I'd agree with you. I think he destroys a lot of people with that, just brute physicality that he has. And Vettori, he's not so much of a slouch himself. He looks, pretty jacked up, and it's a fight, maybe not as good as between Yoel and himself, but I think it's a good competitive match.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that I think that Paulo with this style is a permanent top 3 for the next 3 years. Definitely a top 5 for the next 3 years, and he won't get kicked out of it. If he changes his style, I'm not sure if he has the capacity to really become a fundamental fighter. I mean, he doesn't have the speed necessarily because he's so big and bulky and powerful. If he does put in those changes, of course, like he has the sky's the limit. I just don't know if after this long he has the ability to implement those changes. It might be better to stick to this style, stay in that top 3. Hope Izzy leaves. Maybe when Izzy's up in light heavyweight, fighting John Jones, maybe you get to sneak into title shot here and there while Izzy's gone, and you can become a champion before he comes back and takes your head off again. But I mean, I guess it'll be interesting to see where Paulo goes and what kind of progression he has and what his coaches do with him. He does have a very, very, very competent coach in Eric Abdel. Eric. How do you even say that? Albarracin, I think it is.
Albarracin, I believe, Captain Eric.
Captain Eric. All right. Moving on to our co-main event. Unless you want, actually, what do you think is next for Hermansson? That's actually kind of an interesting question. He's had a very up and down career, right? He's had some big wins, had a couple losses when he really takes on those top guys, but he just beat Gastelum, right? He's not like he's losing to the mid-level guys, and Vettori is no slouch.
I would maybe match him up with maybe it's Derek Brunson facing anybody upcoming.
I don't know. I feel like he was, but I don't remember who it is, to be honest.
Maybe him, maybe the winner or / loser of Uriah Hall, Chris Weidman.
Yes, the winner of Uriah Hall, Chris Weidman could be good. If you want to murder him, you give him Edmund Shabazian, but I don't think that's a good call for him. Maybe you give him an Omari Akhmedov. You have to give someone in that kind of 7 through 13 kind of realm, right? You just gave him a number 13, Marvin Vettori, but not like a permanent number 13. It was a up and coming 13. I think he'll sink down to like a 10, maybe. I think is where he'll be ranked right now, and I think maybe even the 9. I think Omari Akhmedov, the Chris Weidman and Uriah Hall winner is a good call.
Yeah.
Moving on to our co-main event, we had Jamal Hill knocking out or TKOing OSP. which was a classic kind of veteran versus up and coming prospect kind of fight. We had OSP in his 40th career fight, taking on a 7-0 undefeated but young fighter. I mean, he's not that young, but young in he's like 28, 29, but he's young in his career, right?
Right.
7-0. And Jamal Hill, he's got that new age boxing. He's got really crisp boxing. He's got that confidence and invincibility kind of mindset of an undefeated fighter. And it looked like it was a really, really competitive fight, the entire fight, I thought OSP was putting up a fight. Yes, Jamal was winning, but OSP was putting up a fight. And then Jamal hit him with a couple punches, and it just, all of a sudden, OSP just shut down. And it was just a matter of time, 20, 30 seconds later, it was over.
Right. Yeah, and, OSP has had a huge career. 40th career fight is crazy. He looked like a little bit weathered. I think that showed a bit, especially leading to the finish. It was still, like you said, very competitive and a great fight. But I think it's time maybe OSP considers a new route, maybe leaving the fight game. I don't know how much competition there is left for him. He did win his last fight, but it's not the OSP that faced John Jones. He's had some fights.
Yeah, I mean, he has been beating decent competition. Who was the guy he recently beat?
Alonzo Menfield.
Yeah, Alonzo Menfield is a good fighter. So it's not like OSP is losing to all these guys, but and Jamal Hill is a good contender. There's a reason they put him in a co-main event slot, even though he is very, very green. But yeah, when you're at, what is he, 38 years old now, 37 years old, fine. He's 40 fights in. He's fought for the title, but it's been years since. He doesn't have a very clear route there. If I'm being honest, I think you mentioned this before we started recording. I don't think it's his option right now. I think that there's a very real chance that no matter if he wants to fight again, he won't be fighting in the UFC, because we'll be talking about this in a little bit. But Dana announced last night after that post-fight press conference that they are going to be cutting another 40 to 60 fighters in the next few weeks. And when you look at a guy who's this old with this many fights, who doesn't have a clear title picture, they just fed him to a young lion, knocked him out, kind of moved the little star power he has left over to this young guy. This is kind of how the fight game works. You get old, they feed you to a young guy, and then they get rid of you. And it's horrible.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So it looks like it's going to happen, yeah.
Specifically to OSP, I mean, the proof is sort of in the pudding that, like, anytime he fights, what do they show on Instagram? Just like the 3 or 4 Von Flue chokes that he holds.
And his left high kick on Corey Anderson.
Right. But like, that's all you see. His resume hasn't expanded from that in terms of like flashy knockouts or finishes. So not saying that's something that you need to get, but you still have to be competitive. And, I think he sort of lost a bit of that fight in him.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I kind of hope that we see him for maybe one more. I mean, again, he did knock out Menfield with a really, really nice counter right hook, I think it was, where he did like pivot right hook and just knocked him out. It was really nice. He has something left. It's just, if the UFC is going to cut people, I'd rather see them cut these guys who I don't see fighting for a title than these young guys who we don't know where their ceiling is. I kind of want to see them grow.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Another thing that we're kind of seeing as a general trend in the UFC really is they are, because they have this COVID era where fights are jumping and moving and everything, they kind of want a lot of these young guys who they can pay a bit less and are a bit more desperate and a bit more willing to take fights on short notice or change opponents with 3 hours to go before the fight, whatever it might be, because that's who they kind of need. And these guys are going to go for the finish in the fight and be flashy, even if they're not quite as good. If they're young, they can develop. And if they don't develop, they bring in some new guys, and they don't need these old guys anymore as much because they just keep that machine going. And these old guys sometimes can't fight as often, and they demand higher pay, and they demand more respect and all these other things that these young guys might not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Kind of a shame, to be honest, but I guess
it is the reality, unfortunately.
It's the fight game, man. It's a horrible game. It's a very unforgiving game.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, before we move on, I just want to mention that in that 185-pound division, it is no longer called the middleweight division. The UFC rankings have called 185 the average weight division for I don't know how long it was up there, but it was at least for a few minutes. We got some screenshots, and you're telling me that Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero are considered average weight.
Oh man,
absolute ridiculousness.
I want to hear Bruce Buffer say the new average weight champion of the world.
Yoel Romero is anything but average, as Joe Rogan will tell you. His eye ligaments are 3 times the thickness of any other. Oh, ridiculous. Our featured bout of the night, we had Gabriel Mowgli Benitez knocking out Justin James with a devastating, just a brutal knee right to the body, to the solar plex. Mm-hmm. I swear he must have broken a couple ribs there. The way that James went down with that knee, that was just brutal. Mowgli getting that fight of the night, performance of the night bonus, and for good reason. Fuck, man.
Yeah, anytime comparing like a body shot KO to like a head KO, it's just like 2 completely different experiences. Like one, unfortunately, your lights go out and you're unconscious. But like Brock Lesnar and Alistair Overeem, like seeing like the hurt in their body, and like Jeremy Stevens and Aldo, and you just see this pain that's like no other. And as soon as he threw that knee, you could tell that like fight was done.
And it's so weird because I think it's so impactful because you're so used to seeing these fighters never show pain. You see these guys throw these devastating leg kicks and then poker face. And it's just like, I don't know how, like, I'm like, oh, and they don't react. And then when you see someone react like that and their whole body shuts down, but they're awake and conscious, it's just, you're like, oh my God, that must have hurt. I guess it's kind of funny. Yeah. When I see a knockout, I'm like, shit. Ooh, man. Like, I hope he's okay, but that was fucking crazy. Once to the body, I crumple. I literally go, oh, yeah, man.
You feel it.
You feel it. Your whole body tenses up. You feel the pain. You're like, oh man, brutal. Fuck. I guess it's, I don't know. There's something different about the reaction there. That's a very interesting point. But Mowgli, he was, to be honest, outpiecing Justin James. He was hitting him hard, but that left side in general of Mowgli hitting the right side of James, that whole fight was just brutal. He was getting that left kick to that back right leg. Right leg was just red. He had James had this area on the right side, right underneath, I guess, the nipple, right on the top of those ribs, that was just red from all those left hooks and left body kicks. Those left body kicks were just eating James up. And then finally, James went for that long right hand, exposed his liver, and took a knee and went down. Fuck.
Yeah, great fight.
Speaking of devastating, the comparison between devastating body knockouts and devastating knockouts. We had a scary one last night. We had a very scary one last night. Jordan Levitt brutally slammed, Matt Wyman. So Matt Wyman tried to almost do that, one of those jumping guards, jumped, kind of closed the guard, opened it. As soon as he closed it, Jordan took his right hand, he posted on his right forearm, right on the chin. So Wyman couldn't brace for the landing at all. Just went head first, slammed him into the ground, and Wyman was unconscious for, I think, 5 minutes plus. It was scary. I wasn't sure what was going to happen there, man. That was really, really scary.
Yeah, because I mean, if you just like look into it, if you punch somebody and you drop them and they're unconscious, it's different from you're holding the weight of their body and you're slamming them down like with the force of gravity. There's just a lot more power in that.
300 pounds straight on their head.
Yeah, and it showed. He was like instantly, as soon as he was knocked on cold, he was just stiff, and it's exciting is sort of an unfavorable word to use, but it's disturbing to see at the same time.
It is also disturbing, and thankfully Levitt seems like the nicest guy in the world. He does not seem like a fighter. He seems like a school teacher. I think he is a school teacher, actually. And yeah, he just seems like such a nice guy. He didn't go for any follow-up strikes, didn't need to. Thankfully, he didn't. But I mean, even after he says, "Man, like, I guess like I was really good. Whatever I see that I teach this, so I went for it." And like, I mean, I hate to see guys get hurt, but I mean, it's a fight game. I guess it's kind of what happens. I hope he's okay. I hate to have to hurt him. I wish I could have won without hurting him like that. But I guess that's what it is. And it's just like he's just such a nice guy who just. I mean, I remember on the Contender Series, he seems like this is not his big dream that he grew up as a kid always wanting. This is something he fell in love with, and he's still in love with it. He just kind of wants to see how far he can take it. But he's not this guy from the streets who just a fighter growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
He's not a Michael Bisping where this is his dream, his legacy. He's just like he seems like a guy who picked this stuff up and just was really good at it and just wants to see where he goes.
Yeah, and I mean his celebration just show it all. He's got quite skilled doing the splits and dirty dancing. His coach is lifting him up.
Yeah, with the whole what was it? The Titanic move.
Yeah.
I guess one last fight that we want to talk about. But great job by Jordan Levitt. Wishing the best to Matt Wyman, but with as many gray hairs as he has there, and with a knockout that brutal, he might be joining that list of 40 to 60 fighters. So we'll see what happens there. Roman Dolidze, John Allen. This was a great fight. Roman Dolidze won very clearly, in my opinion, 2 out of those 3 rounds. I think it was the first and the second round were very clearly Dolidze's and John Allen. And yes, this man, John Allen, is Brazilian, apparently. John Allen clearly won the 3rd round, in my opinion. So I think it was a very clear-cut 29-28 for Roman Dolidze. And it was a 29-28 victory on only 2 of the judges' scorecards for Roman, and a 29-28 on 1 judge's scorecard for John Allen. Now, who was this dissenting judge? Well, his name is Chris Lee. You may remember him as the judge who also somehow scored Paul Felder over RDA just a couple weeks back. He is also the judge who is now being a part of 11 split decisions in the UFC or Bellator in the year 2020. And out of those 11, 8 of them, he was the dissenting judge. 8 out of 11. I don't know how this guy is still judging in the UFC, how the Vegas State Commission is still allowing this man ringside or cage side.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. We talk, at least once a month. There's 1 or 2 big fights that were like, come on, that was terrible judging. And that always gets brought up with tons of, huge fighter podcasts and big celebrities saying like the judging is terrible. It has to be changed. And this is just more evidence to pile onto it. Like it is your job to properly score the fights, and you owe it to the fighters. They're putting everything on the line, and it's can propel your career, in either an extremely positive direction or negative direction. And it's unfortunate that it's occurring like this.
Yeah, I mean, so there's something to say about that, about the whole thing about changing the judging. I think this is not the same thing as, judging in MMA needs to be changed. Yes, that is a conversation. That's a conversation that needs to be had. It's an important one. Maybe our scoring system doesn't make sense. Our scoring system isn't perfect, and fine. But that's a difficult conversation to have. That's a very difficult thing to implement. We have to test it in all these different scenarios. We need to think of all these different manipulations of the rule set. We need to get all these different commissions to agree. We need the UFC to agree. It's a very difficult thing to do. But this is a bit different here. This is one judge who we have very clear data, who's been around for a while. He's been judging for 15 years, apparently. I think 14 years. He's a man who has consistently being on the weird end of split decisions. At the very least, Vegas should be taking a look at this guy, and there should be some avenue for the UFC to say, hey, commission, take a look at this guy. Maybe this person should not be judging. We don't need a whole big overhaul of the judging system. We just need a little bit more just responsibility or accountability. Actually, that's the word, accountability on the part of the judges for us to know how they came to this decision. And if it makes no sense, for have them either have to go through a mandatory retraining or something of the sort, or just to remove them altogether. But there can't just be this consistent one guy making these terrible decisions again and again.
Yeah, you're right. It's unrealistic to try and strive to like reconstruct the whole system, but they should be, you know, removing the little small issues that they're having, like one consistent judge that keeps making the wrong decision. Yeah. I mean, the UFC probably wishes that they could add him on top of the 60 fighters that they're cutting.
I mean, Dana made sure that Mario Yamasaki never refed again. Why can't he make sure that Chris Lee never judges again? It's the same thing. The warrior spirit of the judge. I think that's what happened. I think Paul Felder's had a greater warrior spirit than RDA, and that's why Chris Lee gave him the fight. So let's go into that news. So into that 40 to 60 fighters. We've been mentioning this consistently throughout the night. In last night's post-fight press conference, Dana White did say that between 40 and 60 fighters will get cut. And in the same breath, he was mentioning and responding to a question about Yoel Romero, who was just cut from the UFC. Dana's excuse was, look, he's lost 4 of his last 5. I think he's actually not lost 4 of his last 5. I think he's only won 1 of his last 5, but one of those was a tie. Regardless, he's only won 1 of his last 5. He's 44 years old. He's been around for a while, whatever, this and this. We have to cut some guys, and he's just one of those guys we had to get rid of. This is very, very, very big. We're going to see a lot of middle and even top tier names that we don't expect to lose gone. What the UFC loses here could in a way be a little bit of Bellator and ONE FC and PFL's game. A lot of these old guys have names, have potential. Yoel is a marquee free agent. He can be the champion in any organization right now, including the UFC. He could beat Izzy. I wouldn't favor him in a fight to beat Izzy. We saw what happened in that weirdness, but he could beat anybody in the world at 185. And I think it's going to be an interesting switch of the landscape as the UFC drops this many fighters at once.
Yeah, as much as I don't wish to see like Yoel get cut, you know, I still think there's great fights in the UFC. To be honest, it does make sense. You know, how many times have we seen him rise to the top, get a title shot, and just, you know, not perform to his ability? And, you know, at the end of the day, he is getting old, and, you know, he's only won 1 of his last 5, so might as well just start filling in some new younger prospects and get out with the old.
It's just the machine that is the UFC. It takes in young people, and it spits out the old ones and the young people that got knocked out too many times.
And it'd be different if I was just gonna say it'd be different if, you know, he won 4 of his last 5 and he was looking great, and, you know, maybe on the run back for another title shot. But the fact that, you know, he hasn't performed the best to his ability over his last few fights, you know, it just makes sense, unfortunately.
Yeah, you have to wonder how many of these older guys are especially going to be cut. Like a guy like, if maybe they'll I think they're going to do a lot of these feeding old guys to young guys, and I guess this is a bit of a transition. But I think a perfect example of this is feeding Dominic Cruz to Casey Kenny. I think they're going to give, if Dominic Cruz loses this fight, they're going to force him to retire. They're going to say, we're done with you, or we're giving you more young lions, but we're not giving you any more marquee fights until you win a bunch. And they're just getting ready to cut him. I think we're going to see a very big trend of this even more. We've always seen a trend of feeding the young guys to the old guys, or other way around. I think we're going to see this get stronger, so they have more excuses to get rid of these old guys, and they don't waste that bit of potential. They squeeze those last few drops out of those old guys' names, like we saw with OSP and Jamal.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I think we're going to see some fighters over the next few months that are, you know, vets, and they have, you know, 1 or 2 bad performances, and unfortunately that'll be it. Like, I have a feeling now that you just mentioned that maybe Overeem's next 1 or 2 fights, they'll see, if he wins 2, maybe he deserves a title shot because he has looked pretty good. But if he loses, then, what's the point?
They're fighting for their careers. But I think we're going to see a lot of guys who are in their one last run fighting for their careers every fight from now on. Every fight, they're going to move up the ladder. Absolutely. But if they lose, they're gone. And we're going to see that with Overeem. We're going to see that with Cowboy. We're going to see
Cowboy,
that. Yeah. We might see that with Paul Felder, for all we know. After this loss to RDA, they might give him a couple more, but not many more. I think we're going to see that for a few of these older guys that are nearing retirement. Dom Cruz, another one. TJ.
Tyron
Woodley for sure. Robbie Lawler's done. Robbie Lawler's has one more fight. He's being cut. Same thing with Diego Sanchez. One more fight. He's being cut. Yeah,
I'm just taking a quick look here.
Mike Perry, if he loses the next fight, you never know what's going to happen with him. Like, dude, we can see a lot of big names gone.
Sorry, I was caught up in my words here, but Jose Aldo, I don't think that they would cut him anytime soon, but they did just, book him up with a tough fight.
He's fighting in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He's fighting Chito Vera, and that is a tough fight. But I think Jose's got a while left in the UFC. He's also quite young.
Right, but what I'm
Jose's
saying is, like,
they are.
Think. Yeah.
Like 33 or some shit, or 32. He's like,
which is crazy considering like his career.
I'm pretty sure like Adesanya is older than him.
But what I'm saying is, like, they are feeding him to a young lion. Not saying they'll cut him anytime soon, but they are giving these vets like very tough fights.
Yeah, I think actually
the name of the game.
To be fair, in the Jose Aldo example, I think they've always done that. When you consider after his losses to Max Holloway, after those 2 losses, who did he fight? He fought Jeremy Stevens, he fought Hinato Moicano, and he fought there was one other guy around like mid to top tier that he knocked out before they gave him another title fight, I think. Before he lost to Volkanovski. But he fought 2 or 3 guys. I think maybe it was just Stevens and Moicano, but then they gave him Volkanovski, and if he beat Volkanovski, he would have gotten a trilogy fight against Holloway. So they've been feeding him to the young lions every time he loses, and he takes them.
Yeah, good on him,
and he beats them, man. Like, Jose Aldo is not a man to sleep on. The guy just keeps on coming. Or Jose Baldo, as Triple Clown would call him. In other MMA news, I mean, speaking of some young prospects being signed, a very, very, very interesting prospect was just signed to the PFL. Clarissa Shields, potentially the best female boxer on the planet. Number 1 or number 2. It's very clear she's in the top 2 for sure. Female boxers on the planet. She's only 10-0. Professionally, but she has 2. She's the only American ever to win 2 Olympic gold medals in boxing, which is freaking crazy. And she is signed with the PFL. This is a really interesting signing. She is, I believe, a 145-pound fighter. So she'll be featherweight, so she's quite heavy for a female fighter. But you never know. I mean, obviously we know what her issue is going to be. And that's, of course, takedowns, right? She has 0 grappling. But she's been working at Jackson Wink with John Jones. I think she's diving head first, and she's only like 24 or 23 or something years old.
Oh, wow.
So she's got a ton of time to grow and develop into a marquee MMA fighter, and her boxing skills will let her stand up with anybody. I'll let you go in a second. I was just listening to Morning Combat with Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell's breakdown of this, and something that they mentioned that I found very interesting. I mean, I think she is probably the best boxer ever to enter MMA. The only close comparison to her would be maybe a Holly Holm. However, Holly has something that Clarissa does not, and that is a bunch of kickboxing experience. When you're in MMA, you don't stand at boxing range. You stand at kickboxing, maybe a bit even wider range, right? So kickboxing range allows you to know how to stop the takedowns and give you more time to get out of the way of the takedowns. Right. Clarissa doesn't have the kickboxing range, so she has to be in boxing range, and so she has to open herself up more to the takedowns. And that's going to be a really big hurdle for her, and why we might not see as much success in her career as we saw in Holly's.
Yeah, first of all, I think it was a great idea for her to transition to MMA. She's the best female boxer in the world, which, from her record, seems like she is, then she doesn't have much else to prove in boxing, at least for a while. And her being so young is like of such vital importance. That'll allow her to, take that time and build those skills where she needs to improve in the grappling and kicks and stuff like that. And so it'll be interesting to see. So yeah, of course, her biggest weakness is that grappling and kickboxing area, but something that will benefit her so much is just her mind. She's a dedicated fighter and one of the best boxers in the world, and her mind will prove a lot of strength, I think.
Yeah, she's got two things going for her in that sense. So as you said, the mind, in terms of a fighter's mind, she's got a fighter's mindset, is what I've been told. I'm going to be honest here. I haven't watched her box. I actually don't know a ton about her. I'm speaking off of I'm speaking mostly off hearsay. Morning Combat is one of my bigger sources for boxing, especially. What they've been talking about her is that she's a real fighter. She's a girl that knows how to fight through real issues. I mean, she hasn't had to show that yet in boxing, but when you're being taken down and ground upon and ground and pounded, and that's when that fighter's mindset really has to come out and show. And additionally, the other great thing she has for her is that she's one of the most athletic boxers out there. Not only is she very skilled, but her athleticism is what helps her a lot as well. And that'll, I think, be a big thing that'll help her transition into grappling. When you're talking wrestling, you need crazy athleticism. When you're talking scramble ability, a lot of that, if you're just that naturally athletic, that helps a ton in those areas. And it'll hopefully help her learn quickly. And especially when she has the level of coaching as, a Jackson Wink, which Jackson Wink is an interesting choice. What I found with Jackson Wink is that they don't train the fighter to become the best version of themselves. They kind of train the fighter to be the best version of a Jackson Wink fighter that they can. They have their
that's a good point.
Very distinctive style. John Jones and Holly Holm have the body types and I guess the ability to use that style very effectively, and they've been very successful with it. Other fighters don't fit as well into that mold. Cowboy, Diego Sanchez, who both left that gym as a result. I don't know. I think it's a really good basis to work off of in Clarissa Shields. It'll be interesting to see if that's a style that works for her, or if we need more of a Firas Zahabi or what's it called? Wow, I'm a Trevor Whitman to kind of bring out the Clarissa Shields fighter instead of the Jackson Wink fighter that's in Clarissa.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Maybe there are some better options, but I think now it's just good just to start, building those molds and just getting that experience in the ground game and the kickboxing and stuff like that. And it'll be interesting to see where she goes.
Yeah. Okay, let's do a couple more things. So we have, as we mentioned, Dom Cruz is returning against Casey Kenny. We mentioned it briefly beforehand. I just want to talk about that very quickly. I think the biggest story here is just the fact that they're giving Dom Cruz, a guy with such a small name. They're not giving him a Uriah Faber fight. They're not giving him a Legends fight. They're not giving him even a top 5 fighter. They're giving him Casey Kenny, who's a very good fighter, but it's a classic feeding the old guy a young, hungry lion and seeing what happens. Can he hold his spot, or will the young guy propel himself into that real big title shot conversation?
Yeah, I still have a lot of faith in Dominic Cruz. I've always been a Dominic Cruz fan. I probably favor him in this fight. To be honest, I haven't seen too much of Kenny. I just know he's a very good up and coming fighter. But I agree to your point. I definitely think they should have given him a bigger name. And, we'll talk about this more in a bit, but TJ's coming back. And I thought that would have been the perfect fight. Made a lot of sense. They had a very good fight back in the day. And
yeah, so who do you think that TJ should fight, actually? Because we have a couple things written down here. I think the 3 fights to me that just are the most fun is, of course, that Dom Cruz fight. The rematch would be so good. If we had, of course, a Uriah Faber fight, another kind of throwback, have that Team Alpha Male versus TJ Dillashaw story, revive it a little bit. But I think the up-and-comer fight that I would want to see him fight most is the Sugar Sean O'Malley fight. I don't think they're going to make that fight. I think they're going to give Sugar a different fight first. Sugar was saying that the fighter that he was saying a few weeks ago, and they were talking about him fighting, was Thomas Almeida, who's not a very big name yet. And a bit lower down than TJ Dillashaw. So I don't think that they're going to give Sugar that fight quite yet, but I think that would be such a fun fight with those super, super active on the feet, come to knock you out styles.
Yeah, I agree. That would have been a great fight, but unfortunately, I don't think they'll make it. But realistically, they'll probably give TJ like Sandman or Frankie Edgar or something like that. Somebody in that top 5.
I think they give him Sandhagen, I think I want to see Sandhagen get that title shot. The problem is that if we see Aljo win, it'll be hard to sell it unless he beats TJ. So I think if Aljamain wins, they do a TJ versus Sandhagen. If Aljo loses and Jan wins, then Sandhagen could go straight to a title shot right now. Either of those things can happen. Yeah, because I guess who do you give Edgar? If Edgar, sorry, so not Edgar. Who do you give if Aljo wins, who fights Aljo next?
That's why I think there needs to be a fight in place, like around the same time, like a TJ versus this Sandhagen or Edgar or something like that. Like I think there needs to be a fight to make a number 1 contender.
Yeah, I think it really hurt the UFC the fact that this fight, that the Aljo and Jan fight, was moved from next week's card, because I think it would have brought a lot of clarity and it would have told them what to do with TJ. Because then they would have known who is a champion. And again, that really big issue is just the fact that Sandhagen had that real quick loss to Aljo, and they don't want to feed him back to Aljo that quickly, because you just need to build him up against. It's too quick for the rematch, I think. But if Aljo loses again, then you can give him Jan, and that's a very justifiable fight. So we'll see what happens there. Also in that 145-pound division, this is what was 135. In the 145-pound division, we had some interesting news. We spoke about this last week. Yair Rodriguez, quote, not fighting anytime soon, according to Dana White. We now know what it is. It is, in fact, a USADA violation. It was a whereabouts violations, meaning he, for 3 times in a calendar year, or in a 1-year period, whatever it is, 3 times Yair failed to reveal his whereabouts to USADA, and he has been given a 6-month suspension. However, it is, I forget what the term for it is, but point is he's already served 3 out of those 6 months. So he is eligible to return in March. So what does this tell me? To be honest, USADA is a fucking joke. Because look, you're telling me that if you're on something, you could just skip some things and get a 6-month suspension and get off it and you'll be fine? Or they just, man, I don't even know what I want, because I feel like a lot more guys than we know are on steroids, and we kind of like the fights we're seeing. Like, I don't know, man. Like, what do you do about this kind of thing? Oh, we lost you on video. There you are.
Sorry, somebody gave me a call. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's it's interesting because if more fighters want to do this and they're just getting served with a 6-month suspension, and they're still getting some of the effects or advantages of the steroids that they're on, then like, what does that mean? And it makes USADA look like a joke. So I don't know. Something might change as a result of this. Maybe I'm not sure.
And it's like it's just, and then there are these other guys who are having their careers destroyed. Tom Lawler is a classic example. We saw Sugar Sean lose 2 years of his career or whatever to these bullshit violations, and then these other guys we know are getting away with it. So it's not working on either side. It's not catching most people, and it's catching a lot of people and fucking over people who shouldn't be fucked over. Something's got to change. I don't know what the solution is, but it's just it's a mess right now. Yeah. But I mean, we'll see who he fights when he's back. We'll see if Zabit wants to wait that long to come back. Who do we give Zabit now? Now that 145 division's a bit stuck.
I was gonna say, who has Zabit fought last? Like, I feel like it's been a while since he's.
He didn't fight Cater or Stevens, one of the two.
Oh,
he beat both of them though. But so he beat both of them. He was supposed to be a number 1 contenders bout against Yair, and that's not happening anymore.
So he fought a year ago. You have to give him
a number 1 contenders bout against somebody. Do we wait for Yair or not? I guess is the big question.
Yeah.
I mean, you can give him Zombie. Holloway and Cater are both taken, so that's done. Maybe you can give him Holloway. Maybe you can give him Zombie. I don't know. It's a tough one. And I mean, Volkanovski will be taking on Ortega, but also speaking of Volkanovski, he's actually been talking about after a few more title defenses, maybe I'll go to 55.
Ooh.
I'm going to be honest. Look, he is an insanely good fighter. I think Volkanovski is one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. I know he's a champion, but people do not think he's very good. A lot of that has to do with those Holloway fights. I think he won both of them. Regardless, I don't think he can fight at 55. I don't think he has the length for 55. I saw Holloway barely had the length for 55, and he's a big 45er. Volkanovski is not as big as Holloway. Holloway gave him a little bit of difficulty with the reach in that second fight. I just don't see Volkanovski being able to put his game plans to work against these guys as big as Poirier, these guys as big as, I mean, maybe not Khabib, but Ferguson. Like, I just don't see it working, man.
Yeah, I think his like physicality would play a very tough role for him being competitive in 55. Like, he's just too short and stocky, and
too short.
The only person that I could see him have a realistic matchup with is like Michael Chandler, he's a little bit taller and a little bit bigger, but they sort of have a similar body.
But you know what? Hasn't Michael Chandler been historically also 145 fighter?
I'm not sure. Has he?
I'm pretty sure Chandler has fought at featherweight. So, I mean...
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought he was lightweight for...
I thought he was both.
He was lightweight for a majority of his career, for sure.
Was he?
But
I thought he fought featherweight for a bit. But maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn. You can take all that back. I wish it said on... I wish it said on Wikipedia and stuff what class he fight on. He fought at. Or on Sherdog. Anyway... point is, yeah, Michael Chandler has that short, stocky kind of style that Volkanovski does, but I still, I don't think Volkanovski would do well at 55. I think you stick to 45. I think he can be the champion for a long time, and he can have numerous title defenses at 45. I just don't see him winning at 55.
I think we need to see him fight somebody else other than Max Holloway.
That's also true. Other news, we have a potential Colby and Jorge finally being booked in February. This will be an amazing co-main event, I think. However, I would rather it be a fight night card because I want to see Colby and Jorge main event a 5-round fight. I don't think that's the same fight at 3 rounds. I think in 3 rounds, I don't know who wins at 3 rounds, to be honest. I think Colby eats him alive at 5 rounds. I think Colby is an easy winner in a 5-round fight over Jorge. 3 rounds can go either way.
Yeah, I also think it's due to a bit of a lack in activity. Like, I haven't seen the last time we saw Jorge was against Kamaru Usman, and that wasn't even on a full camp. So, I don't really know where he's at, and
yeah, but look, where are we actually seeing Jorge? Like, he had an amazing performance against Darren Till. He had a great flying knee against Ben Askren, tells us nothing about how he can deal with Colby. He had the Nate Diaz fight, great boxing, doesn't tell us how he's going to deal with Colby and his takedowns and his pressure. Then he had that fight against Usman, and that's the only thing I think you can take anything out of. But you still can't completely because you didn't get a full camp.
Well, I think
the style you can.
Here's what I think you can say to that is that he has excellent wrestling defense, and that showed in the Usman fight. He was on not training on a full camp. He was able to, competitively stand with Kamaru. It was very difficult for Kamaru to take him down. And he's also a very technical striker, and you saw that in the Darren Till fight. And Colby has phenomenal striking, and he has very good wrestling. So I definitely think it'll be a super competitive fight.
Here's where I think Jorge is lacking a little bit, and that's his ability to break away. Once he gets he has amazing jiu-jitsu, he's amazing in every space, and he's not necessarily getting eaten alive in that clinch against the fence again. Even he was taking less damage than Tyron was, right? Against Kamaru. But he doesn't have the ability to break away. He doesn't seem to have the ability to get someone off of him when someone's on him. So he might not take a lot of damage, but he'll still lose the position for a long period of time. And Colby is just a master. That's what he does. He just outpositions you. and just works at you. And that's all he has to do for those 3 to 5 rounds is just outposition him, and he'll win those rounds. So even though I don't think that Colby is going to really, really hurt Jorge, I think Jorge is too good for that. I just think he's going to outposition him, out-wrestle him, can do that usual hump my knee kind of, but that's what he's going to do, and I think he's going to win it.
I mean, the other reason why this is going to be such an interesting fight is, how many years of experience do these guys have training with each other and all that knowledge and information? Like that's also a big role. So, both fighters will have pieces of information about each other that, is unlike any other matchup that we'd have in the UFC.
Yeah, and I think that those teammate matchups, it'll be kind of interesting to see. Maybe did one of them grow a lot since they left the gym and stopped training together? They haven't trained together for a while, but I mean, from my understanding, back when they were training together, it was Colby taking over always. And I think Colby's improved more than Jorge has, just by nature of Colby. When he was coming in, he came in way later than Jorge. When he was coming in, Jorge was already kind of settled. I don't think that Jorge had as much room to grow further since he stopped training with Colby, because he was already training for so long. Whereas Colby was a lot newer to the game, still had a lot of room to grow. And if he was already better than Jorge and he's had more room to grow, I think my assumption, I could be wrong, of course, is that he did grow more than Jorge did. And if he was already better, he's just going to be even more better than he was. Makes sense. Even more better.
I saw something kind of funny that said they should match Colby up with like all of his former teammates. Like they should have him fight Dustin Poirier. They should have him fight JDS. They should have him fight
JDS. Okay. I didn't see JDS coming. But Poirier and you'd eat Poirier. I think you'd beat Jorge. RDA would be a good matchup. Like there's some good typical ATT matchups in there for Colby. I think I'd love to see those. I do think RDA is ATT, isn't he? I think he is.
No, RDA is with Perillo, Jason Perillo.
Oh, he is with Perillo. That's true. Yeah, he's with Perillo. Okay, I'm wrong there, but either way, still would be a good fight. And I think RDA would still want to beat his ass for those Brazilians. You're all filthy animals and all that kind of stuff. All right, I guess we have one.
Oh wait, we just ignored the fact that they already fought.
Did they?
Colby and RDA fought for the welterweight.
Oh yes, obviously they did. Yes. That was an interim title. Interim title. When Woodley was champion for a while. That's right. Okay, that's stupid. We knew what happens there. Yes. All right, we have, I guess, one last thing to talk about in terms of our news before we move on to next week. And I guess it's two things to talk about, but it's the same thing, and that is the Diaz brothers. Who will they make their returns against? Nate Diaz, I guess, if Jorge is off the mat. With Colby, we don't know who Nate's going to come back against. But it also appears, according to Nick Diaz's manager, that he will be making a comeback in 2021 as well. So my question to you, Adam, is who would you like to see the Diaz brothers face, and at what weight class?
So I think Nick will certainly be 170. I doubt he'll fight at 185. I think that was just for Anderson Silva. But Nate, I don't know. I honestly think there's a good matchup for him at 55, but I feel like he won't make that weight cut anymore. I feel like he'll only fight at 170 as well. So I would like to see him against Dan Hooker at 170. I feel like that's a fun fight for Hooker to take.
Great fight.
Unfortunately Hooker lost to Poirier, and I think he still has fantastic potential at 155, but I feel like it's just a fun fight to take at 170.
Here's my problem with that. The UFC doesn't like those. The UFC doesn't like the 170 fight for 155ers. They say, if you're going to be 170, be 170. And so, Nate, if you want to be a 170, or you can be a 170, or fight 170ers, though. You're not fighting 155er if you're going to fight at 170. Or they'll tell Hooker, if you want to fight him at 170, go for it, but it's not going to do anything for your 155.
Right. Yeah. So I think Hooker would have to take that into account. And, I'm not saying Hooker beating Nate Diaz should give him a title shot at 155, but in terms of just strictly them fighting at 170, I think it's a good matchup.
It's a good matchup. I think that they would say we'll do it, but only at 55. Personally, is what I think they'll do. But we'll see. I think that it would be a good fight. If he's going to fight at 170, I don't want to see him fight a top 170. I don't want to see him fight, like a I can't think of someone right now. I don't want to see him fight a killer, like a Santiago Ponzinibbio or something, right? That's just not a good call for Nate. I would want to see him fight, or Nick, actually. I would actually like to see fight someone like Dan Hardy, who's also hasn't fought in a long time and wants to make his comeback, or a guy who's maybe on his way out that they can kind of still a bit of a legends fight, a Tyron Woodley or a Robbie Lawler or a Diego Sanchez, one of those guys who kind of hasn't fought, who isn't going to fight for the title, who's got that name value, but isn't as much of a threat. You don't kind of feel as guilty watching.
Yeah. I honestly think for Nick, Tyron makes a lot of sense, both coming from Strikeforce. Tyron, unfortunately, sorry, Diego Sanchez. Tyron isn't looking nearly as bad as Diego Sanchez. But I think that's a good fight, and it would be competitive. We can gauge clearly how Nick is doing and, how he looks and what his future is like. But I think that'd be a good fight for him.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. And I think you're also saying, hey, Nick, we're giving you a former champion. This guy's a legend. You're not giving him nobody, right? You're not. Right. It's someone that Nick it has enough name value to kind of, Nick is like, okay, I'm being respected, I hope. Kind of feels respected. But also, again, yeah, we're not scared of ending this man's whole career. I mean, that might happen anyway, but, ending his life along the way. All right. Next week, we have a pay-per-view. It's been only 3 weeks since our last one. It's been 2 weeks right now, but it'll be 3 weeks between these pay-per-views. And just like on the last pay-per-view, is being headlined by Deiveson Figueiredo. Amazing, amazing job. First man to ever defend his title twice in 21 days, or attempt to, twice in 21 days. And he will be fighting against Brandon Moreno, who also, as we've mentioned, fought on that card just 2 weeks ago, and will be fighting twice in 3 weeks. Fantastic main event. I think Figueiredo has the physicality, has the confidence right now. He's on a roll. Personally, I think Figueiredo's biggest competition on next Saturday or next week is going to be the scale.
Yeah, I agree. I think if he can get past the scale, I think Moreno's a great fighter, but I think unfortunately he just steamrolls right through him.
I don't think Moreno has the power to keep up with Figueiredo. I think Moreno has the quickness. I think he has really clean striking. I think he's a really good matchup. I just don't think he can hurt Figueiredo. And Figueiredo knows that. And the way he fights is like, you can't hurt me and I will put you out. He fights like Yoel Romero a little bit. The thing is as well about Figueiredo is, as we said, the scale, that can, even if he makes weight, he could still be affected by it the next day. And all of a sudden that invincible chin he has could become invincible, if that's a word, right? When everyone knows when you don't recover properly, it can be very, very dangerous for your chin. So that could be a problem, I think, if it's a struggle to make the weight, but he still does. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree that the scale is his toughest matchup.
So I think we both agree on the feet, especially the first 2 rounds is going to go Figueiredo's way. What about the ground?
I'm not too familiar. I mean, Moreno did very well against Royval on the ground, like just keeping control and acting defensively.
Floating.
And Royval has great jiu-jitsu himself, but we've seen Figueiredo display his jiu-jitsu. I mean, he has phenomenal ground game, so I still think he dominates him there too.
He's so aggressive. I think Moreno doesn't seem as aggressive. Moreno likes to float a bit more. Figueiredo fucking attacks, right? He goes into the position and he just grabs the submission, snatches onto it. And these 125ers, because they're so small and skinny and quick, they seem to latch onto these submissions so much more easily. And maybe sometimes they get out more easily, but they seem to come out of nowhere, right? We have the classic the classic DJ flying armbar against Ray Borg. That was insanity, right? So I think we can see another sneaky submission, just like we saw 2 weeks ago, happen against Alex Perez, where he just knocking that guillotine out of nowhere. I kind of want to go Deiveson by submission. I have a feeling Moreno is going to go for a takedown and get caught. I think that's my prediction. Deiveson to go by submission. Second round.
All right. Second round
submission.
I'm gonna go first round submission.
First round submission. I might be more likely to be honest, but I'm gonna stick to my guns. Our co-main event is maybe even more exciting than our main event. Tony El Kakui Ferguson is back and he's against Charles Oliveira. We have some guillotine Darce specialists in our main and co-main event
The
tonight.
Darce Knight
next
rises.
week. The Darce Knight rises. So these boys are both the kings of Darces, the kings of guillotines, and along with, as we just mentioned, Figueiredo, who is a master at that guillotine. So we're going to see some heads being snatched next Saturday night. Some necks being severed. So I think both. The other thing about Tony against Charles, not only is it the Darce off, the two masters of Darces, but it's also the two masters of elbows. These are the two guys.
The blades and shades.
Blades and shades, right? Elbows from the bottom, elbows from the feet. These guys are active as it gets. They have these sharp slicing elbows, and we're going to see some gashes and some necks being snatched. That's the story of next week's co-main event.
Mm-hmm.
Bloody and choky.
Yeah, I'm very excited. To be honest, I'm a little bit more excited for this fight than the main event. But I think the biggest challenge for Tony will be how is he going to look after suffering his first loss?
Absolutely.
In, God knows how many years. I'm not sure who I would edge, to be honest. Like who I would favor in that fight. Do Bronx is very good upcoming. He seems to be like the dark horse of the lightweight division, but I think Tony's the dark horse of the lightweight division. Oh, the dark horse of the lightweight division. But I think Tony still has it in him and still wants to prove that he is the best 155er.
I think that you kind of said it, but I think you got it a little bit off. It's not how will he respond after his first loss in 12 fights, which, to be honest, I'm not actually worried about. I think he'll respond loss-wise fine. Mentally, Tony's a fucking beast. Mm-hmm. I think it's how does his body respond to the beating he took. Mm-hmm. It does. I'm not worried about the loss. He's such a veteran. He knows what the fuck he's doing. But I think when you take a beating like that, that's a historically bad, brutal beating. And he's not a young chicken. He's taken beatings over his life. And that was his first real sustained beating. But he's taken a lot of accumulatory damage over a long career. Can he be the same guy he will want to be? Can he be? Will his chin hold up? Will his body hold up? How will he respond to the weight cut? These are all really serious questions. I think that if Tony Ferguson of 2019 comes into that fight, Tony Ferguson will destroy, or not to destroy, but I think I definitely give him a 2-1 as a 2-1 favorite, maybe even 3-1 favorite over Charles. As amazing as Charles do Bronx is, I think Tony is just too much for him. But if we see a diminished version of Tony, I don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I think you make a great point that his mind will certainly hold up, but his body may not. And that'll be a big tell. And I'm just going to go off the whim. I'm going to say Tony gets a Darce choke.
Oh, dude, I will be so happy. I will be so happy if Tony gets a Darce. In a 3-round fight, that's also interesting because Tony, has that in a 5-round, it's all Tony, right? And a 3-rounder, who knows? So, that's a little dangerous for Tony. I can actually see Tony by Tony Ferguson TKO. And by Tony Ferguson TKO, I'm saying doctor's stoppage after the 2nd round.
Oh,
that's a true Tony Ferguson.
Yes.
finish. Who needs a Darce so he can get a doctor's stoppage? The Darces and doctors. That's the Tony Ferguson way. Darces and doctors. Our featured bout is also this card is just stacked top to bottom. This main card is so fucking good. Renato Moicano taking on Rafael Fiziev. I'm not sure which. This man trains at Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand. He trains with Volkanovski, he trains with Valentina, and he has, along with Adesanya, the best matrix dodge for kicks in the UFC. Those two men can not move their feet and avoid head kicks like nobody else. I think he is better than Adesanya. That back flexibility is just craziness. He had one of those in the UFC. He's a Muay Thai specialist. If Renato does not take him down, he's fucked. And Rafael has some of the craziest takedown defense I've seen in a long time. I think Fiziev is going to take care of Renato Moicano, and Moicano is a top-level fighter. And Rafael Fiziev is going to make a statement in this lightweight division. I think we're going to see some movement into the rankings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree. I haven't seen too much of Rafael, but I know Hanato is a top level guy, but
It's lightweight too, by the
Rafael.
way. He's making his lightweight
Oh, is
debut.
it? Oh, I didn't know that. Oh,
And which is
okay.
another reason I'd give Fizaev the edge,
Yeah.
because Hanato hasn't fought this at this weight class yet.
Mm-mm.
In addition, we had our old switcheroo match. So as we mentioned, last week was not supposed to be Hermansson against Vettori. It was supposed to be originally Hermansson against Till, but as of a couple months ago, and until about a week and a half ago, it was supposed to be Hermansson against Kevin Holland. Unfortunately, Holland got COVID. Vettori got moved up, and Holland will now take on Jacare Souza, who is supposed to take on Marvin Vettori. So Kevin Holland against Jacare Souza is a great fight. Jacare, of course, one of the best submission threats in the middleweight or average weight division. Kevin Holland has won 4 fights in 2020, trying to win 5 fights, being the second or third fighter ever to win 5 fights in a calendar year. And this is a very, very tough matchup, a real big step up for Kevin in this middleweight division. He does have, of course, that nice, clean knockout of Joaquin Buckley that you should remember just a few months ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen Jacare. I think his last fight was against Jan, I want to say.
Well, it might
and they
have
fought
been.
they fought to a decision.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a fan of Jacare. I think he's a great fighter. That being said, he's getting up there in age, and if he loses this one, we also might see him being added to that list. I feel like,
Oh my
because
gosh.
he has lost, because he lost that Jan fight, and then I think he lost to Hermansson as well. Maybe
Jacare,
before
he
that.
lost to Hermansson. Yes, he did.
Let me just pull
But
that up.
he lost to Hermansson first, I think.
Yeah, so he lost to Gastelum, and then he beat Chris, and then he lost to Hermansson, and then lost to Jan.
So he's going back, and if he loses to Kevin Holland, now all of a sudden you're taking a step down. That is a bit different than a Jack Hermansson. It's a bit different than a Young Blachowicz, right? It's a bit more of a step down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's 40 years old, so he's not getting any younger. So
Yeah.
If he doesn't win, unfortunately he might be
Or
added
they
to
give
that
him
list.
one more real top contender to just put him out. But yeah. And I think really horribly, but a similar thing might be said about JDS. JDS taking on Cyril Gahn. This is a crazy, by the way, step. This actually I don't think is going to happen. I think JDS will stick around just because JDS, they need heavyweights, and he's always fought those heavyweights. He's a really good measuring stick. He's a great gatekeeper for this heavyweight division. I think he's useful for them in that sense. I mean, he beat Derek Lewis last year. He lost to Francis, of course. He beat Curtis Blades, and he lost to Jairzinho. So, I mean, when you see his back and forth, he's beating the guys that he can. Oh, sorry, he lost to Curtis Blades. Sorry, he lost to Curtis and Jairzinho. So he's on a 3-fight losing streak. Francis, Curtis, and Jairzinho. That actually changes things. 3-fight losing streak now. And now he's taking a step down in competition. He's not fighting a top 6 guy anymore. He's fighting Cyril Gahn, who's just breaking into the top 10 now. Up and comer. This man trains with Ngannou. He's a French fighter. And he's just been showing some really good striking game. Somehow got a leg lock against Dante Mays about a year ago, which was out of nowhere with like 10 seconds left, got a leg lock in the heavyweight division. It was crazy. But I think it's a really competitive fight with JDS. It's a really good measuring stick to see where Cyril is, and we'll see where JDS still is in his career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think you're right. We also may have him added to that unfortunate list, which is sad to see. But we'll see. Maybe he can propel a little bit of energy off this, but we'll see.
Yep. I guess 2 more fights to mention. I will say that our headliner of our prelims is Cub Swanson making a comeback against Daniel Pineda. It's a little bit of a I wouldn't actually expect this fight to be headlining the prelims. I guess what I'm actually going to say here is going to bring up that second fight I was going to talk about. I'm surprised that Cub Swanson and Daniel Pineda are headlining the prelims when they could have headlined with Tisha Torres and Angela Hill. I'm shocked to see Angela Hill coming off being the first Black woman to headline a UFC card or to be a UFC main event, to all of a sudden being the first fight on the prelims. Now, it's not the early prelims, it's the normal prelims, but Why is this not headlining the prelims? I think that Angela Hill is a great person to be pushing. She's already been making some UFC commentating debuts. Why are they not putting her as the main event of the prelims at the very least? I don't understand it. Or at least a co-main. Mm-hmm. The first fight of the night doesn't make sense to me. Or first fight of the prelims.
Anytime Dana, like fighters or journalists bring up how like certain fights should be boosted up to like the main event of the prelim fights, Dana's always like, well, they're kicking off the prelims, and like you gotta have a great fight to start the prelims.
But yeah,
which I agree with, but like,
no, you get
Angela Hill's a much bigger name.
You get a great fight with people you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't get a name that you're trying to push, like an Angela Hill. You're trying to push her. I thought she's so marketable too. She's awesome. I love my Angela Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I believe that wraps it up for next week's card. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Any more news? Anything else to talk about?
No, I think that's everything. Busy week. It'll be a busy next week.
I guess actually very quickly, let's just give a couple predictions. We said that we saw Fiziev winning that card, both of us. Who do you want to call for the Ronaldo Souza, the Jacare Souza against Kevin Holland?
I'm gonna call Jacare by submission.
I'm gonna say Kevin Holland then. I'm gonna say Kevin Holland's gonna win by decision, 3-round decision. And then I'm gonna give Cyril Gahn the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna go with the young guys this time. I'm gonna say Cyril's gonna beat JDS in knockout.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning that way too.
I'm gonna go 3rd round knockout, which is interesting, but
yeah, I'm gonna go 2nd round knockout.
Find out. All right. Well, we got our predictions. They are in for UFC 256 next week, taking place in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the UFC Apex. We will see you guys after that card. Of course, remember to like, comment, subscribe on the video. Leave us any comments. You can ask us any questions. We'll answer them next week on the podcast. And until then, Noah will be back next week. We'll be a trio, and we'll cover a great pay-per-view card. Until then, for Adam, I am Roie, and we will see you next week.